Okay. So the source material covers the investigation into the deaths of the three Decker girls, Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia, and then that long manhunt for their father, Travis Decker. It ends with the recent discovery of remains believed to be his near Leavenworth.
Right, and a big challenge running through all this seems to be keeping the story straight, you know? With such an emotional case, evolving news, and tons of speculation flying around.
Exactly. Let's jump right into the structure first, because I think that's where there's a real opportunity to increase the impact. Looking at how the story's presented now, well, the timeline feels very fragmented.
It really does. It jumps from the initial awful discovery to the mother's grief, then these scattered updates about the search across Washington, even Idaho.
Yeah, and that scattering, I think. Doesn't it kind of lessen the blow of that final breaking confirmation about the remains?
I think so, yeah. It's clearly laid out what happened, but constantly re-reporting bits and pieces instead of building a clear narrative arc, it risks diluting just the sheer horror of it all.
Mm,
You know, think about the reader trying to follow this. You've got May 30th, the disappearance. June 2nd, the bodies are found. Then a leap to the June 20th memorial.
right.
Then, like, way later in August, some FBI search efforts pop up. And only then, September 18th, the remains are found, like less than a mile from the crime scene.
That jumping around just kills the narrative tension, doesn't it?
Completely. By the time you get that final update, the audience is almost worn out from all the little updates. That final punch, the resolution, it just doesn't land as hard as it could.
I agree. That fragmentation really weakens the urgency. I think the material would be stronger with more of a search and resolution frame. Anchor the emotional weight, the facts, the why early on.
Okay, so lock in the context first.
Yeah, get the audience invested in that hunt right from the start.
So one way to do that, maybe, establish the gravity right away. Focus on those core, confirmed details about the victims, Peyton, Evelyn, Olivia, their ages 5, 8, 9, found suffocated, ruled homicide.
The terrible facts.
Exactly. And crucially, Decker's DNA on the zip ties, the bags. Then, right after that, you pivot to the fugitive himself, Travis Decker, his background.
The complexity, yeah.
Right. The Army Infantry Service, the EIB, that's the Expert Infantry Badge, the Parachutist Badge, but also the documented BPD and PTSD, and the fact he was homeless, living out of his car.
Okay, hold on just a sec. I want to pause there. For listeners maybe not familiar with all the military stuff, why list those specific badges, the EIB and parachutist, right up front? Does that automatically mean he's some kind of super evader?
That's a great question. It's less about predicting his actual skill, maybe, and more about setting the expectation for the reader. It signals the potential difficulty of the manhunt.
Ah, okay, so it frames the challenge.
Precisely. The EIB shows, a high level of infantry skill. So when you build that picture, the tragic facts, then this potentially formidable fugitive, it makes the ending, the successful investigation by Chelan County, the FBI, the marshals.
The discovery near Leavenworth on September 18th.
Yes. It makes that feel like a much clearer, hard-won victory. Front-load the tragedy and the challenge, and you earn that powerful resolution.
Exactly. It sets up that classic hunter versus hunted dynamic much more effectively. But, a strong structure only works if the content is focused.
Right.
Which brings us straight to the second point I wanted to raise. Completeness and focus. I felt the material sometimes struggled here, mixing confirmed facts with, well, a lot of outside noise and speculation that didn't really move the story forward.
Spot on. And there's a risk there, isn't there? If you focus too much on just the volume of chatter, do you maybe sideline the critical evidence, the stuff law enforcement actually used?
Like, what kind of chatter are you thinking of?
Well, I saw things like a mention of some unrelated Decker training facility for ATV racing, totally irrelevant.
Okay, yeah.
Or conflicting early reports like, was the dog killed or was it fine? The material mentions both without clearly resolving it based on later confirmations.
Right, those unverified claims muddy things.
And even vaguer stuff, like his supposed internet searches about jobs in Canada. It just adds clutter, you know? Takes away from the known facts.
I see that. That kind of noise definitely clutters the picture. But couldn't you argue that mentioning some of the public reaction, like on Reddit, people calling him sick, a coward, pushing those revenge theories, isn't that actually important context?
How so?
It shows the immense public pressure the investigators were under, right? Even if it's not like courtroom evidence.
That's a fair challenge. And yes, it is context. But the way it's presented here, I felt it kind of overwhelmed the actual prosecutable facts sometimes.
Okay.
So if the goal is solid reporting on the investigation itself, maybe the material could be improved by just being really strict about qualifying speculation.
Making it clear what speculation versus fact.
Exactly. And making sure every key piece of info connects directly to motive or method the suffocation, the zip ties, or the manhunt itself, like his background suggesting survival skills.
So minimize or clearly fence off that extra stuff.
Yeah, but, maybe it could be even stronger. Could you elevate the whole piece by directly contrasting the confirmed facts with expert analysis?
Instead of just random internet comments?
Right. For instance, you've got the confirmed facts about Whitney Decker's legal filings, her concerns about his worsening mental health, the paranoia, the instability that led to the restricted custody back in 2022.
Okay, established facts.
Then, contrast that directly with expert opinion. You mentioned the resource who commented on his military background.
Ah, the Special Forces officer, Michael Hawk.
Exactly. Use his analysis. Hawk pointed out Decker never got a Ranger tab, never did SIR training.
Right, SIR being survival, evasion, resistance, escape.
Yeah, which is like the gold standard for truly long-term evasion skills. Hawk suggested Decker had limited tactical credentials for really hiding out long-term.
That's interesting, because the public narrative immediately jumps to military guy equals Rambo.
Totally. So that expert voice cuts through the hype. It provides real depth and context for the search team's confidence, It grounds the story without relying on those unverified claims or just general noise.
That gives the audience a much clearer picture. Reality versus the often overblown narrative. That analysis really does slice through the speculation. Okay. This kind of leads into the final critique area, which is about audience alignment and purpose fulfillment. The tone in the material sometimes shifts pretty dramatically, right? Between the absolute heartbreak from the mother's perspective and then this almost like high-octane coverage of the manhunt.
Yeah, that whiplash.
It risks confusing the piece's ultimate goal, which feels like it should be about delivering closure, about justice being served.
Building on that, yeah, the sheer scale of resources thrown at this search sometimes gets lost in the shuffle of emotional commentary. We're talking over 100 officers, right?
FBI doing grid searches, the marshals putting up reward money.
Searching hundreds of square miles of incredibly rough, mountainous terrain. That sheer investigative effort, that tenacity Sheriff Mike Morrison talked about. That needs to be front and center for the resolution. It's a vital part of the story.
The search itself is an incredible story of just not giving up. So to really nail that purpose, closure through justice, the material needs to emphasize that persistence, federal, local, all working together.
Especially given his background, the skills he did have.
That is the heart of the resolution, isn't it? And we need to make the difficulty concrete, highlight the terrain challenges.
How specifically? Well, the sheriff mentioned that astounding fact. 87% of Challen County isn't accessible by road.
Wow. 87%?
Yeah, that one detail is gold. It instantly conveys the massive difficulty level. It justifies why the search took so long, why it cost so much.
That really frames the eventual success as something truly earned, not just stumbled upon. How do we best get that sense of methodical, relentless pursuit across?
I think you emphasize the long-term strategy. Use that fantastic quote, I think it was the sheriff or one of the lead investigators.
The one about being perfect?
Yes. He has to be perfect every single day. We just have to be perfect one day. That quote? It's the perfect distillation of the whole thing. Law enforcement strategy versus a fugitive eventually making a mistake.
It frames the discovery as almost inevitable. a victory of process.
Right. It adds this high-stakes, ticking clock to the search. It's strategic, not just emotional.
I love that. It reveals the mindset behind the massive operation.
And then, to tie it all together, once you've shown that incredible persistence, use the mother's words from the memorial. They provide the ultimate emotional justification for why all that effort mattered.
Her quote about their legacy.
I truly hope that the legacy of the girls' lives lives on in everyone's heart forever. They were incredible. Placing that after highlighting the investigative victory, it balances the tenacity with the profound human cost. It fulfills that purpose. Justice sought, victims honored.
That really brings the structure full circle, connecting the procedural with the personal. Okay, so overall, what I liked here was definitely the depth of detail, the military background info, the mother's efforts, the sheer scale of the manhunt. That was strong material.
Agreed. The raw ingredients are there.
But the narrative structure felt scattered, like we discussed, and it got pulled off course by some distracting noise.
So the most important next steps, I think, are threefold. And they really need focus. First, enforce that clear narrative timeline. Prioritize resolution over fragmentation. Build that tension.
Right, the search and resolution arc.
Second, be really strict about differentiating confirmed facts, DNA, cause of death, the expert analysis, like Hawks, from all the external speculation and noise. Label it clearly or minimize it if it doesn't serve the core story.
And finally,
really amplify the resolution delivered by the investigators. Frame it as a strategic victory against extreme challenges, the terrain, the suspect's skills. Use that perfect one-day mentality.
highlighting that strategic win.
Yeah, that commitment to a focused narrative, prioritizing the confirmed updates and the strategic pursuit over the swirl of emotion or online chatter. That's what will best serve the core story here. Justice for Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia.
Makes sense. So if you take this feedback, polish the materials, really tighten that timeline and focus. And if you want to explore perhaps the longer-term impacts of cases like this, we definitely invite you to submit your work back in again.